Yahoo Finance at the Milken Conference in California. Special guest joining me right now. That is Vista Equity Partners CEO Robert Smith. No stranger to Yahoo Finance. Been a while. Good to see you.
Been a while. Good to see you.
So let me just tick through a couple of these things.
Sure.
We had Liberation Day, hit tech stock valuations. The IPO market is ground to a halt. I think the last IPO I covered was CoreWeave down at the NASDAQ.
Right.
Level set for us. Are we looking at a tech stock winter?
It's a good question. I think that there needs to be a basic understanding, first of all, what is the impact of GenAI across technology generally. That's not well understood. We had our annual general meeting last week, and it was very clear in having conversations with our investors that many of them were actually confused about what is the actual impact of GenAI, and so hopefully we were able to explain to them what the impact is, what the opportunity set is, and then it's got to manifest. It's got to actually produce some results. You and I chatted briefly about Microsoft and some of the work they've done and seeing their results. A lot of it is now starting to manifest in ways like other waves. Every single time there's a new change in paradigm in technology, it happens in waves. Hardware typically as a first beneficiary, infrastructure provider second, software typically third. So I think we're just at that point where people are really starting to understand, well, what is the impact, what is the implication, and what are the advantages of owning those securities and those stocks? And so it's going to take some time for that to play out, and it's going to be a while before the equity market's ready to receive those sorts of businesses.
And what is the impact, well, what is the risk to tech from tariffs?
There is risk in the hardware aspects around tariffs, not so far in software. Software is probably one step removed.
You're the software expert here.
The good news is in enterprise software, we're not seeing tariff and the direct implications of our businesses. This is still an enablement tool. GenAI is actually going to feed this enablement tool for people to become more efficient as they have to realign supply chains, supply lines, et cetera. We also get tremendous amount of data in evaluating. I was looking at shipping data. I was looking at aircraft, air transportation data coming straight out of our systems to get an understanding of what the impact is. You are going to see some slowdowns in some sectors, no question about it. We're already seeing it. But in enterprise software, when you actually need to do more with less, if you actually need to expand your revenue opportunities in the new markets, enterprise software is one of the most efficient ways to do it. And as you start to enable that with some agentic solutions, which will come pretty soon, you'll actually see some pickup in that market space. Hardware, I think, is going to get impacted. You've got some geopolitical dynamics around there that are going to reshape the way that certain assets are actually utilized and consumed across the planet.
I should mention, of course, Robert, 89 companies are in the portfolio. You've been investing in tech for what, 25 years?
25 years.
You just celebrated the 25th anniversary?
We sure did.
Oh my God, that's
quite
amazing.
Exciting.
What is when you hear Apple get on its earnings call and say, hey, we're going to get a $900 million hit because of tariffs, what's the downstream effect to tech from something like that? That's a huge number.
Yeah, it is. But you'll see, look, they have a phenomenal management team there. Tim is one of the most exceptional business leaders I've ever seen in my 25, 30-year history. But there has been a reshaping of his supply chain. There's a whole ecosystem around how they assemble those devices, build those devices, develop those devices, and now being forced to rethink that, you have to rebuild that ecosystem. It isn't just one group doing all the work, it's an ecosystem. So it will take time. As that happens, there'll be a phasing in of new technology on top of those platforms. The good news in my world, enterprise software, you're basically not, you can actually develop on top of platforms, but you can develop when the platforms are static as well. That's why it's been the most productive tool, because you actually introduce a new platform, which is hardware. They actually have some utility, some life associated with them. Whereas enterprise software, you can constantly innovate because you're now gathering data, insight, information from the users of this technology and can develop new products and create new utility for those products without actually having to change the hardware platform.
89 companies. Within these 89 companies, are you seeing any slowdown? Customers pausing demand because of the macro uncertainty?
I'm going to knock wood. So far, we have not seen it in the consumption of enterprise software. However, we have seen some effects because of reshaping in the U.S., for instance, of our government contracts, not that they've been canceled, but the people who needed to sign the contracts are no longer there. So
because of what, Doge?
Because there's been some of that activity, some realignments, certain restructurings of departments and government entities. We've seen that dynamic, not at scale, but we have seen it. The other thing that's actually quite interesting is, again, being able to evaluate the data sets of what's actually occurring globally. You do see slowdown in certain segments, not in the consumption of software, but in the movement of goods. And so people, of course, are looking at how do they, which is essential, so it doesn't actually impact the enterprise software world. We saw this in the great financial crisis. When they were bailing out the auto industry, our enterprise software businesses actually picked up in terms of utilization because people needed to be more efficient with what they do. And I think Satya spoke a little bit about that yesterday. It is the most resilient, it's the most durable. It actually gives you the opportunity to do more with less.
Lastly, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, gave a speech here earlier this morning, and he said China is catching up to the US on AI. You're an international traveler, you do work over various lines of business overseas. Is that gap really as close as he suggested?
I might argue it's closer than he let on.
Really? How so?
China has some highly capable people, a vast amount of resources, a high frequency of engagement with innovation. You can just see it in the auto industry, and I don't know when the last time you were there. I'm there.
Xpeng.
Yeah.
They're making flying cars now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing what you see. I mean, there was things that I saw in AI in China in 2017 and 2018 that we were just scratching the surface on here. Now, GenAI, a different dynamic, requires a different utility, a different, in essence, compute capability. But as you saw, DeepSeek in different ways, that wasn't a surprise as to where they ended up. It was just a surprise of where it came from to most people. It wasn't a surprise to us. So part of it is, as you travel around and you see and you actually have relationships and evaluate, look, it is, once we liberated, and I'll say this, compute to the world, it's not unsurprising that you're going to have instances where certain environments and people and countries actually are quite advanced in the work that they do. So this is not surprising.